Hello and welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. Today we go beyond the buzzwords of energy transition to examine the real engines driving global energy forums. It's no longer just about fossil fuels or green technologies. It's about sovereignty, sanctions and strategy. In diplomatic cycles from Doha to Davos, energy has become a proxy for power, and forums have emerged as battlegrounds where national agendas collide, converge, or quietly evolve. This conversation comes as Baku Energy Week wraps up today, an event that brought together regional stakeholders, global investors, and policy heavyweights. But beyond the speeches and signing ceremonies, deeper forces were at play. With trillions at stake and rival corridors competing for influence, access to energy resources is now as much a question of law as it is of logistics. International ownership frameworks, pipeline politics, and regional alliances all shape who sits at the table and who controls the flow. So what role do these gatherings actually play in shaping global order? Are they platforms for cooperation or contests for control? First, let's take a look at the broader picture.
It is no longer confined to technical discussions. It now sits at the center of international diplomacy. Baku Energy Week, which concluded today, brought together ministers, CEOs, and international stakeholders to discuss the future of energy. The forum addressed not just production and transition, but investment, transit routes, and cross-border governance. Events like this now serve as platforms where national energy strategies are announced, regional alliances are reaffirmed, and global legal frameworks are tested. In recent years, countries have used such forums to advance pipeline projects, secure energy partnerships, and respond to shifts in demand. Examples include the Russia-Turkey Energy Corridor, EU-Africa Green Investment Agreements, and China's infrastructure funding through the Belt and Road Initiative. At stake is not only access to energy, but ownership rights, regulatory control, and long-term supply agreements. Legal disputes have emerged over maritime borders, pipeline transit terms, and investment protections. Multilateral organizations such as the EU and OPEC use these platforms to promote coordinated action, whether in fossil fuel management or renewable deployment. Simultaneously, multinational corporations play a growing role, particularly in setting technical standards and shaping long-term market expectations. Developing economies are increasingly present at the table, calling for a fairer global distribution of energy resources and access to clean technologies. Energy transition has also brought new areas of negotiation, ranging from rare earth mineral supplies to digital energy infrastructure and emissions tracking systems. As global demand shifts, bilateral and regional energy agreements are changing. Long-standing arrangements are being reassessed, while new contracts are often accompanied by conditions related to security, climate policy, or trade access. International arbitration centers have seen a rise in energy-related cases, reflecting the complex legal terrain underpinning global supply chains. Energy forums now reflect this complexity. They are structured opportunities for governments and industry leaders to clarify strategy, signal intentions, and negotiate outcomes, under the scrutiny of international media and investors.
So joining me now in the studio is Kostis Geropoulos, Director of Energy, Climate Policy and Security and ENI Global Media, and a veteran observer of how power is negotiated behind closed doors. Let's unpack the forces driving the new age of energy diplomacy. Well, welcome to our studio.
Anastasia, good to be here.
Thank you very much. So you participated in Baku Energy Forum. Let me start with a question. In your view, how have energy forums shifted from technical platforms to geopolitical theaters?
Well, I think it also depends on the forum and the location. In this case with Azerbaijan, it's not just an energy forum. Azerbaijan is a major energy producer, an exporter, and a key player in the region. And this forum has happened for the last 30 years. So it was named something else, but it's still, it's a point where, as you mentioned earlier in the opening, it is a very key region, and it's also becoming more than a forum, but it's actually a negotiating PowerPoint. And in this case, you have representatives from ministries. The first day they had the ministerial panels, and right after the panels, they were rushed off to private meeting rooms, and then they had their own agreements signed or negotiating. So, in front of the cameras, of course, and in front of the panel, there is an opening statement and some discussion, and sometimes there are some news, but a lot happens behind closed doors.
Behind the cameras, behind the closed doors, indeed. From your point of view, which national actors have most efficiently and effectively used these platforms? Now I'm talking not only about the forum in Baku, but overall the energy forums globally to advance their strategic agendas.
Well, I think the major energy companies, as well as OPEC, the European Union, they use this for negotiating. A lot of times it's also a good opportunity to state their positions publicly, and then at the same time advance their agendas. So the European Union position is very well known at the same time as OPEC, but we saw that a couple of days before, OPEC had made the statements about the energy prices and the output. So the fact that the forum follows a couple of days later is a good opportunity to drive those points forward, and at the same time test the water and see for future agreements and projects. It's also a good negotiating because you bring all those players together, which all those projects are multinational projects, and a lot of times even with, in the case, for example, for the European Union, even there is EU backing, it will be the investors or the key players that would guarantee if that project is sustainable or not. So in this case, it's a good opportunity for all the players to be together with the private sector, with the public, the state actors, and also the investors to discuss it.
Well, you're right. You're rightly saying that there is opportunity and there is a possibility for countries to come together, the representatives of different oil companies, to negotiate, to participate in the discussion. But still, we have to understand that the situation with energy development, energy policy is not the same in all the countries who are participating. Therefore, are we witnessing a redefinition of sovereignty when it comes to energy transit and resources ownership?
Oh yeah, of course, and there is a national level, and energy security is not only diversification, but it's every country is also looking at its own private energy security, and of course geopolitics. It affects. In this case, actually, it was interesting also because I saw that there were players also from Somalia and from Africa, and also in this panel they brought in not just for the Caspian and the Central Asia region, but there was also involvement from other continents as well. And it's also not just about energy, but it was extending into climate policy, rare earth minerals, which of course are a key part of the energy, especially as the world shifts towards renewables. But at the same time, pushing forward the importance of hydrocarbons. And it was also, within the debate of moving forward with renewables is also, gas was established as an important transition fuel as well.
But it was quite difficult for the countries to come up with a solution during COP29. We do remember how it was complicated, but still they could agree on some financial sources to be provided for the future development. You mentioned Africa, and the situation there, it's not every time determined with a position of justice and, let's say, a one-sided approach what prevails in this particular situation. Therefore, do you still believe that international law can keep pace with energy deals that often bypass the traditional frameworks?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it has to be a just energy transition, and in that case, in Africa, I mean,
who can guarantee that just energy transition?
Yeah, it's a very difficult proposition. At the same time, a lot of those countries in Africa have rare earths which are necessary. So, in a way, for the renewables, but at the same time, they need cheap energy. So there has to be kind of a give and take. In that case, obviously they cannot adapt really expensive technologies, when they have the hydrocarbons or and they're sitting over huge reserves, and adapt. But at the same time, they can also help with the energy transition, and the same if they are guaranteed lower price energy or investment deals that really help push their countries into a next level. So if investors come in and they really help those countries develop, then there will be a good trade-off.
Of course, the development for the situation in Africa is clear. Yes, definitely investments are needed, and the international support need for some of those countries in the African continent. But in the beginning, I mentioned also the sanctions.
Yeah.
So we do remember how the situation changed since the start of the war between Russia and Ukraine, the situation within the European Union, and some countries were even pushed to stop cooperation with Russia, even if it's not good with their domestic interests and their own future priorities. Therefore, in this particular situation, how do you think the international law should be adopted, and how the countries themselves should decide whether they select the just position to have a just approach to the situation in different parts of the world, or they should take their own priorities and their perspective for the future development?
Well, you mentioned sanctions in the case of Russia. I mean, there is a debate within, for example, the European Union right now. Because
Hungary has totally different approach.
Yeah, I actually spoke with the Hungarian Deputy Secretary for State this morning, and they're still importing a huge amount of gas through Turk Stream, and they're also very relying on uranium for their nuclear power plants, and they're thinking of expanding it. So for them, it's an issue of energy security as well. So they would not want complete phase out. At the same time, Hungary is interested in diversification, so they're looking at other projects. A lot of it, I saw that his statement also, he said that they're interested even for the possibility of connecting the Green Corridor to Hungary, so they would be interested in renewable energy from Azerbaijan and through Romania. At the same time, they want to keep importing Russian gas, and this is Hungary is part of the European Union, and there are also Slovakia and other countries. So the 2027 phase out was discussed, but is by no means a final point. And the European Union sets these kind of targets sometimes just to initiate a debate, and then there would be exemptions or there would be negotiation, and there would be different sets and goals. Same thing as we're seeing this backtracking a little bit on the green energy, because a lot of times they, for example, we saw what happens with Germany and other countries where if you rush too much to make the transition, then you actually end up backtracking.
It will affect also the economic development within the countries. What role do you think the institutions like OPEC, for example, the United Nations or the European Union play in shaping or limiting the national energy ambitions?
Well, we're living in a strange time now, because we're seeing what's happening across the Atlantic with the US also, and this power play between also in China and the European Union, but mostly China and the US. So it's a shifting focus at this point, and clearly, OPEC also they're very concerned about the price of oil. They want the price of oil because their economies, even though they're changing, and we see, for example, for the United Arab Emirates and Masdar and how much they're leading in renewables, because they know. But I think that oil, I mean, there is a discussion, and I think it's eventually actually might run out before even making the transition. But for gas, it's becoming a very reliable fuel. And because we've seen the discussion, and I've been to many fora, especially at the hydrogen forums, we are in Brussels and in Monaco and in other areas where, you know, all the pipelines now, and it was even discussed that are planned with in the future to be able to shift from natural gas to hydrogen. So, you know, we're not looking at a project that is going to be scrapped several years from now, but it's actually will have a future as well. So, you know, the energy mix, it just depends, you know, where you produce the hydrogen, if it's coming in from natural gas, but eventually you want to have it from renewable energy sources.
I had the chance to speak with some participants at the Baku Energy Forum who represent the international organizations, and all of them are saying about the future perspectives. They rely on the position, on the opinion of the governments of the countries who are the members of any organization. Mm-hmm. So talking about the position of the European Union, OPEC, or the United Nations, it's more about the official positions of the governments, member states. Mm-hmm. But how do non-state actors like multinational corporations, for example, reshape the political balance at the forums again, let's say?
You mean also private companies?
Yes.
I mean, it would definitely be able to. I mean, we saw today also with BP being present from, you know, when they started a long time ago, and now how much of a big player are in Azerbaijan and important helping the future. Same thing as Chevron and other companies in Kazakhstan, and we see now like a lot of renewable companies like Masdar in expanding in Uzbekistan, and now also Turkmenistan. We see that they're discussing very vividly about the possibility of exporting natural gas via the existing and future projects. And that was also discussed a little bit today, and yesterday. And it was also discussed in Brussels in another forum I was in earlier in May, where the position, of course, of Azerbaijan is that, you know, they would have to get those countries across the Caspian would have to be able to bring the gas here, and then Azerbaijan would take care of exporting it, but they would not take the initiative because it's ultimately their gas that would be exported to Europe. But there is that potential also, and it's also because a lot of those fields are offshore. You wouldn't need to build a pipeline all across the Caspian Sea, which has been discussed for a long time, but just to Azerbaijan, and from then on, you know, it could be also a renewable future. I mean, or it could be other projects. You mentioned Hungary. In Hungary, you know, they're also talking because, you know, it's not like oil where you can put it in tankers as easily. I mean, you have LNG, but they're talking about swaps too. So in this case, you know, we see the Hungarian companies that are involved in here. In this case, they could produce, and then at the same time, you know, they would swap gas supplies to Europe.
Well, you already partially answered my next question. From your recent reporting, which energy corridor project currently carries the greatest geopolitical weight? Well,
there are projects which, you know, would happen no matter what. For example, you know, the Southern Gas Corridor has been, you know, it was a big decision that took to double its capacity, but it has proven its value, and also the oil pipelines as well. So, I mean, it's a very important geopolitical project, but it's you know, it will not be a game changer in the sense that, you know, it's already been planned, and it will help also bring in more supplies to Europe. The thing is also a big issue that was brought up in a lot of the panels was and also behind with the Azeri minister behind the closed doors was also the off-takers. You know, they want to make sure that if they invest, because natural gas you cannot if you're going to invest and drill, baby drill, as it's the logo, everybody was talking about, it was, you will need to be able to have the customers, and you also need to have a guaranteed contracts to export it.
Then maybe new reality, as you rightly mentioned, green energy transition, and there is a huge potential to export the electricity from Azerbaijan. And to export it to the European Union.
This project, if the Caspian Black Sea one, I think they're now they established a headquarters in Bucharest, and there is a study, feasibility study. So that's a very key project also. And I think it was around COP when they signed the Central Asia Caspian, and that the possibilities that they will connect those two. There is also the possibility for a mini green corridor from the liberated areas to Europe, and I think there's a fourth one also that's been discussed. But basically, the first two could be combined, and then there's also the possibility of a vertical corridor in which the Hungarians also mentioned that they might be interested in as well. And that would be natural gas, but in the future it can also be hydrogen, so that would be also a green project in that way.
Well, indeed. Again, coming back to the green energy transition, how does climate diplomacy intersect with energy strategy? How do you think do green goals enhance or complicate alliances?
Actually, we have at Any Global, we have actually put a new category, which is climate diplomacy. We don't just say climate anymore, because it's very the same way as we have energy diplomacy. Climate diplomacy is a key way, and countries, depending on their assets, their geopolitical position, location, geographically, for example, we see now with all those corridors, there's so many countries involved. It would be it could be even from Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan to Georgia, Romania, and now we've seen the Balkan countries being very interested in this. And Azerbaijan is a very, very important player, especially for Central and Eastern Europe, and then the Balkans, because those countries are depending on Azerbaijan mostly for future energy supplies, and then the ones which were more reliant, especially Bulgaria also. We've seen that Bulgaria joined the Green Energy Corridor recently as well. So, this is definitely climate diplomacy plays a big role, and especially which projects of those are going to move forward. Like we've been before the South Gas Corridor, you remember that we had three or four competing pipelines. There was
and we have to remember that in the beginning, some European member states, European countries, were not so happy about the potential of the Southern Gas Corridor, but when it started to operate already now, it's proved that it's a reliable source, reliable infrastructure, and it helps many European countries to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. And the situation with Russia would have been a lot worse had not been for the South Gas Corridor, and then it helped with. But it's not only, and of course you have LNG, but having a pipeline gas is always one of the best, I think, more reliable. It's always to have steady contracts instead of LNG, which is, the market shifts, and, it depends on the prices, and it's always higher usually than, long-term contracts.
Coming back to the forums, don't you think that sometimes the countries from the global south or the countries with the small economies do not have the same rights as global powers and the big countries who already, let's say, have their own place in the global energy markets?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, in the European Union, because a big discussion was, to negotiate the price of gas as a whole, and we saw that, they were moderately successful with the vaccines, and the idea was that you also negotiate a price, and also you have the situation with storage and having enough gas stored. But at the same time, when I was at the Parliament in May, the European Union decided to relax those requirements, because what's happening was they was driving up the price in the middle of the summer because everybody was trying to fill up their storages, and then you ended up paying really high prices, so you were distorting the market. So that was a big debate at the European Parliament, because sometimes the rules, in order to have gas when you need it, you end up when the price normally would have been a lot lower. So they gave a lot of flexibility to the countries to be able to decide how much they want to store and when to store it. So not everybody is rushing at the market at the same time.
Right. And finally, I have one more question. Where do you see the next major political showdown occurring in the renewables, gas, or let's say digital energy infrastructure?
I think it's going to be on rare earths. I think that the next race is going to be able to say, if you're going to make that kind of energy transition, you would have to have that's why we've seen, like, for example, countries like in Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan all of a sudden get upgraded, and a lot of interest, because they, people in China is always ahead of the game. And we've seen, like now with Ukraine and Trump, that was a key point for him to move forward, because he wants to secure this. So I think that this is going to be very important. It also is the know-how in technology, and also the positioning. And Azerbaijan, in this case, I mean, it used to be mostly a transit country for oil, but then we see now how it has developed as a producer of gas as well, and basically be able to initiate all those projects, and being located in the Caspian. We've seen how windy has been the last couple of days. This is an important resource for renewable energy.
Well, Kostis, thank you so much for joining Inside Politics today.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. So, behind the formal smiles and polished statements at global energy summits lies a world of real politics, of silent bargains and strategic maneuvers. As the energy map of the world redraws itself, the lines are political, not just physical. That's all for this edition of Inside Politics. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina, and from all of us here at Anewz, thank you for watching. See you next time.